Let's be honest, for any practicing clinician, the amount of new research coming out is an absolute fire hose. You've got a waiting room full of patients, a mountain of charts, and, what do you know, another major trial just hit your inbox. You need a fast, reliable way to cut through all that noise and figure out what actually matters for the patients you're seeing tomorrow morning.
And that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? So today, we're going to build a framework to do exactly that. We're going to take a new study, put it through its paces, get straight to the bottom line, and decide if it's practice-changing or not, all in about the time it takes to finish a cup of coffee.
And to do that, we're going to use the recently published LEAP-006 trial in non-small cell lung cancer as our test case. We'll use this really simple 5-question framework as our guide. It's a roadmap to get us from the abstract to a real clinical decision, fast. So let's dive in.
Okay, first things first. You always have to start here. What were the researchers even trying to figure out? Every single good trial starts with a really clear, focused question. So here's the core question for LEAP-006. The standard of care, chemo plus the immunotherapy drug pembrolizumab, is already pretty good. The big idea here was, can we make it even better by adding a third drug, lenvatinib, to the mix? It's a simple question, but a really powerful one, with huge implications if the answer turns out to be yes.
So the question itself is solid. But what about the experiment they designed to answer it? You always have to look under the hood at the trial's architecture to see if the evidence we're about to look at is actually trustworthy and, relevant.
And what we see here is basically the gold standard for clinical evidence. This is a phase 3 randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. This isn't some small preliminary study. No, this is a big, rigorous trial designed to give us a definitive answer. And look at the population. They enrolled patients with good performance status, and importantly, they excluded those with targetable mutations who'd get other therapies anyway. This is exactly what you want to see. This is high-quality stuff.
Now check this out. Look at how beautifully balanced these two groups are. The median age, performance status, PDLN expression, even the rate of brain mets, they're practically identical. This is what you love to see. It means the randomization worked perfectly. So if we see a difference at the end of the trial, we can be really confident that it's because of the drug, not because the groups were imbalanced from the start.
And this brings us to maybe the most important question of this whole section. Just look at those characteristics. A median age in the mid-60s, mostly ECOG-1, a mix of PD-L1 scores. Does this sound like the kind of patient who walks into your clinic for first-line treatment of metastatic non-squamous lung cancer? For most of us, I think the answer is a resounding yes, and that makes the results of this trial highly relevant to our everyday practice.
All right, so we've got a well-designed trial asking a relevant question about patients we see every day. Now, for the main event, right? The verdict. Did adding lenvatinib actually work? Let's find out. Let's kick things off with their first primary endpoint, progression-free survival, or PFS. In the arm that got the extra drug, lenvatinib, the median PFS was
12.1 months.
compared to 9.5 months in the placebo arm. So, okay, a numerical difference of about 2.5 months. But the real question is, was it statistically significant?
And the answer is no. With a p-value of just under 0.08, it was close, but it didn't cross the finish line. And in a big phase 3 trial like this, a miss is a miss. End of story.
So that brings us to the ultimate benchmark in oncology, overall survival. Did these patients actually live any longer? The median survival in the lenvatinib arm was
21.8 months. And in the placebo arm, 22.1 months. Whoa, wait a minute. Not only was there no benefit, the number was actually slightly worse for the experimental arm.
And this gives us our final verdict. A hazard ratio of 1.05 confirms it. There was absolutely no survival benefit, if anything, a slight trend in the wrong direction from adding lenvatinib. This is a definitively negative result for efficacy.
Okay, so if we have a drug that doesn't improve survival, the next logical question has to be, what was the cost of adding it? I mean, did it at least have a clean safety profile? Let's take a look at the toxicity data.
Well, this chart tells a pretty clear story. The rate of severe, we're talking grade 3 or higher, side effects jumped from about 56% in the placebo group all the way up to nearly 70% in the lenvatinib group. That is a major increase in serious toxicity.
And when you drill down, the picture gets even clearer and, frankly, more concerning. More serious adverse events. Almost 10% more patients had to stop treatment entirely because of side effects. And then there's this last number, which is the most sobering of all. The rate of fatal, grade 5 adverse events was more than double in the lenvatinib arm. So what we have is a regimen with zero efficacy benefit and substantially more harm.
So this brings us to the final and really the most important step in our 5-minute analysis. We've looked at the question, the design, the efficacy, and the safety. So what's the bottom line? Does this change what we do on Monday morning? You know, you don't even have to guess. The study's own authors make the conclusion completely unambiguous. They state it right there in the paper, clear as day. The triplet regimen didn't work, and chemoimmunotherapy remains the standard of care. It really doesn't get much clearer than that.
So let's wrap up our 5-minute drill. LEAP-006 was a well-designed but ultimately negative trial. Adding lenvatinib gave patients no survival advantage and came at a very real cost of increased toxicity. So the clinical bottom line, this result doesn't change our practice one bit. In fact, it powerfully reinforces it. Chemo plus pembrolizumab is still the standard to beat.
And this really leaves us with a final important thought. A study like LEAP-006 is a critical reminder that just adding more drugs isn't always better. As we all strive to improve on our current standards of care, this trial forces us to ask a really tough question. How do we balance that relentless search for better outcomes against the very real risk of adding toxicity without any benefit? What's the acceptable price of progress?